Dear service provider, we need to talk.
Oh no.
Not because you messed up. Well, maybe a little, but because we've been speaking different languages. You know, you say uptime. I hear always available. You promise 99.9% and I expect perfect.
That classic disconnect. I know it well.
Welcome to this episode of ITIL 4 Unplugged, where today we're unpacking the beautiful, often misunderstood art of service level management. I'm Jessica.
And I'm Jordan. As Jessica said, we're diving deep into service level management, or SLM as it's often called. And we're using the ITIL 4 practice guide as our map.
Right?
Our mission isn't just to, dissect the documents, the service level agreements, the SLAs, but to truly grasp the why behind this practice. What's the real impact?
Absolutely. Think of this as your shortcut to understanding how SLM goes way beyond just the paperwork. We want to figure out how it helps create a shared understanding of what good service actually looks like.
Not just what some document says it should look like.
Yeah.
And for you, the listener, this is really crucial. Understanding SLM is like getting a universal translator for your conversations with service providers.
Whether that's internal IT or, external vendors.
Right. It's about making sure your needs aren't just ticked off a list, but genuinely and consistently met.
Okay, let's get down to it then. What's the core purpose of service level management? Like, what problem is it really trying to solve?
Well, at its heart, SLM aims to bridge that gap. We just talked about the gap between what the business needs from its services and what the service provider can realistically deliver. It's about setting clear, business-driven targets for how well a service should perform. And then, and this is key, it's about making sure the service is actually delivered and managed against those targets.
So it's like agreeing on the rules of the game before you start playing.
Precisely. Instead of the provider just saying, "Here are the features." It's more collaborative.
Yeah.
The business says, "Here's what we need to achieve." And then those needs get translated into concrete, measurable expectations.
Right? A proper conversation.
Yes, SLM is the practice that helps establish that shared view of service quality. And this isn't just like one person's opinion or some vague feeling good. It's a common understanding between the provider and the consumer, touching everyone involved on both sides. Now, this understanding, it's often written down in SLAs.
Service level agreements.
Yeah, of varying formality. But the real power lies in that shared perspective it creates,
And these SLAs, they can be quite different, can't they? Like super formal legal documents or maybe something simpler.
Exactly. The ITIL 4 guidance really emphasizes that SLAs aren't one size fits all. They vary a lot in formality and detail.
Okay?
The crucial thing is that they clearly identify the required services and the expected levels of service. It could be a very detailed contract.
Sure.
Or maybe just a simpler document, or even just a set of agreed metrics and targets. Depends on the situation.
Okay? So whether it's a thick document or a short list, it's all about setting those expectations for how good the service will be. Now, you mentioned service quality. That sounds, a bit broad. What does it really mean here?
Yeah, it is broad. Think of service quality as the overall package of the service, all its characteristics that make it suitable for meeting the customer's needs.
Okay?
And that includes both the things they explicitly ask for and those unspoken expectations they might have. It's about how well the service does its job and how well it performs while doing it.
Right? So it's not just about, say, the system being up, it's also about how quickly support responds, maybe.
Yeah.
Or how easy it is to use the whole experience.
Absolutely. That whole experience, and that brings us nicely to the idea of a service level.
Okay?
A service level is essentially one or more specific, measurable metrics, things that define either the expected quality or the actual achieved quality.
Like data points.
Exactly. So if we're talking about, let's say, a streaming service, a service level might be the minimum video resolution guaranteed, right? Or maybe the maximum buffering time allowed.
Yeah, specific stuff. Got it. So service quality is the big picture.
The goal.
Service levels are the specific targets we use to see if we're hitting that goal.
Correct.
Makes sense. But what happens when the things we formally agreed on in an SLA don't quite capture everything? Everything that's important to the people actually using the service.
That's a really important point.
Mm-hmm.
Because often the formal metrics in an SLA, they just don't paint the complete picture of how a customer feels about the service.
Right?
That's why getting feedback, actual user feedback,
Mm-hmm.
is absolutely vital. It gives you that subjective understanding, which complements the objective measurements from the tools.
Otherwise,
Otherwise, you risk falling into what's sometimes called the watermelon effect.
the watermelon effect, I like that. Tell me more.
It's where everything looks green and healthy on the surface. All the SLA reports are green, showing targets are met,
But in fresh?
but inside the customer's seeing red. They're frustrated, unhappy with the actual experience.
Green metrics, red customer. I think we've all been there, haven't we? Where the stats say everything's fine, but using it is just painful.
Exactly. And this really highlights why SLM needs to take a holistic view. It needs to consider both utility. Does the service actually do what it's supposed to do? Is it fit for purpose?
Okay, the what?
And warranty, how well does it perform? Is it reliable, available, secure? Is it fit for use?
The how, right?
Service levels often focus heavily on those warranty aspects like availability and performance metrics, but we can't ignore whether the service actually meets the user's functional needs in the first place, the utility aspect.
And there's a money angle to all this too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Someone is keeping an eye on the finances. Service levels, they often act as a way to define the boundaries of the provider's responsibility. And, potential liability if things go wrong.
Limits the risk, maybe.
To some extent, yes. But building a lasting positive relationship with a customer, that depends on their overall satisfaction, which is influenced by both the agreed upon and the implied quality. Sometimes providers might even aim to exceed the agreed levels to build goodwill.
But that costs money.
Exactly. That has cost implications.
So it's a bit of a balancing act then keeping the customer happy versus managing the delivery costs. Who are the key players worried about this balance?
That's where the sponsors come in. You've got sponsors on the service consumption side. They want the best value and outcomes for the money they're spending.
Makes sense.
And then you have sponsors on the service provision side. They're concerned with the efficiency, the cost effectiveness of actually delivering the service.
Sometimes they might be the same person, like an internal IT budget holder.
Could be, or they could be different, especially when you're dealing with external suppliers.
Okay, so SLM helps keep both sets of sponsors reasonably happy by setting realistic expectations, agreeing on levels that meet needs, but are also financially sustainable.
Exactly, and it also gives you valuable information for planning ahead.
How so?
Well, by understanding the difference between the agreed service levels and maybe what the customer really expects or desires, SLM provides key insights for service design. It helps in planning and budgeting for improvements needed to boost satisfaction.
Right, closing the gap.
Closing the gap.
Okay, so we've explored the why, the purpose, the value. Now let's talk about the how. What does a service provider actually do as part of service level management? What are the main activities? The practical stuff.
The ITIL 4 practice guide outlines a set of key activities. Think of them almost like a cycle.
Okay?
You need to identify the service requirements first. Then you agree on the service levels. Then you monitor the performance. You report on how things are going. You review the results with the stakeholders. And then, crucially, you take action to improve where needed.
Identify, agree, monitor, report, review, improve. It sounds like a continuous loop.
It really is. These 6 activities are interconnected and ongoing. And within those, the guide highlights 2 main sort of processes.
Okay?
The first is the management of SLAs. This is focused purely on the agreements themselves, their whole life cycle.
Yeah.
From creation
Right,
through to when they're not needed anymore.
right? Managing the document.
And the second is oversight of service levels and service quality. This is all about actually delivering the service according to those agreements and constantly looking for ways to improve.
Okay, let's dig into that first one a bit. Management of SLAs. What kind of steps are involved there?
Sure, this involves several key stages. First, you need to clearly define the customer's requirements. What do they actually need?
Okay,
Then you need to do a viability analysis. Can we actually do this? Is it realistic, achievable, affordable?
good point.
Next comes drafting the SLA document itself. Then negotiation that back and forth to reach a mutual acceptable agreement.
The tricky part sometimes can be.
Once agreed, you need to communicate and enable the delivery team so they know what's expected. Then you need to review the SLA periodically. Is it still relevant?
Still fit for purpose? Things change.
They do. If the service continues, you might need to prolong the SLA, extend it, and eventually when the service ends, you'll need to formally withdraw it.
Wow, quite a life cycle for each agreement. And I think you mentioned earlier, these steps might look different depending on the type of service, like tailored versus off the shelf.
Exactly. For those standard out-of-the-box services, many of these steps are much more standardized. Defining requirements might just be picking options from a service catalog,
Like choosing a mobile phone plan online.
pretty much. Drafting even the negotiation might just be clicking, I agree on a website. Much simpler.
Right? You don't usually get to haggle with your cloud storage provider over the uptime guarantee for the basic plan.
Not typically, no. But with tailored services, bespoke solutions, there's usually a lot more back and forth needed. Really digging into specific needs, drafting custom clauses, probably several rounds of negotiation involving experts to get it just right.
Makes sense. Okay, and what about the second main process, the oversight of service levels and service quality? What's the focus there?
This is where the promises made in the SLA actually meet reality. It's about the day-to-day delivery. So the core activities here include things like gathering feedback through satisfaction surveys, talking to both customers and end users, ongoing monitoring of the actual service performance against those agreed targets, conducting regular service reviews with stakeholders, and then reporting on the service quality to keep everyone in the loop.
So it's not enough to just set the goals in the SLA. You have to actively watch how you're doing, check in with the people using it, and make sure you're actually delivering. And hopefully, maybe even doing better than promised sometimes.
Absolutely, and again, the level of detail and formality. These oversight activities often reflects the formality of the SLA itself. A really detailed agreement probably needs more rigorous monitoring and reporting than a simple or high-level one.
Okay, we've talked about SLAs and service levels. Let's just quickly circle back to service quality. We said it's the overall suitability. How do the SLAs and the levels help manage that overall quality?
Good question. Think of it like this. Service quality is the ultimate goal, delivering a service that truly meets needs and expectations.
The destination.
Yeah. Service levels are the specific measurable targets, and maybe the milestones that we set, because we believe hitting them will contribute to that overall quality.
The signposts along the way.
Exactly. And the SLA is the documented agreement, the map perhaps, that formalizes those targets and who's responsible for hitting them. So quality is the aim, levels are the measures, and SLA is the agreement.
That clarifies it nicely. Now, the guide also lists different types of metrics we can use for service levels, doesn't it? Things like functionality, availability, performance, even user experience.
Yes, those are very common categories. The guide actually has a useful illustration with examples for each. So for availability, you might attract percentage of uptime.
Sure,
But for performance, maybe it's average transaction processing time. It's a good reminder that service levels should cover a broad range of attributes, not just whether it's switched on.
and you mentioned user experience, UX. That feels important.
Is increasingly important. Measuring things related to how easy or pleasant the service is to use.
And then there's this idea of outcome-based metrics. That sounds different. More focused on the customer's results.
Exactly. Outcome-based metrics shift the focus away from just the provider's technical delivery and onto the results the customer gets from using the service.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Instead of just measuring the uptime of, let's say, an online shop platform, an outcome metric might be the number of successful checkouts completed per hour.
Ah, okay. That directly links the service to the business value.
Precisely. It really emphasizes the value of the service is delivering, but measuring outcomes like that usually requires a very strong partnership and a really clear understanding between the provider and the consumer. It's more complex.
I can imagine. Now, the guide also mentions practice success factors. For SLM, what are the key things that need to be right for SLM to actually work well?
Oh yes, practice success factors. These are basically the critical ingredients for success. The guide highlights 4 main ones. First, establishing that shared view of the target service levels with everyone involved. Second, overseeing the meeting of those defined levels, the monitoring and reporting part. Third, performing regular service reviews to assess how things are going and talk about it. And fourth, capturing and reporting on opportunities for improvement.
It really keeps coming back to that shared understanding, doesn't it? And then actively managing and improving based on that common ground.
It really does. It's a continuous cycle.
Yep.
Agree, monitor, review, improve. You can't just, set it and forget it.
Definitely not. Now, we haven't explicitly talked much about experience level agreements, XLA, though we mentioned user experience metrics. How do XLA fit into this picture?
That's a good question. While the specific practice guide for SLM doesn't dedicate a section to defining XLA as a separate thing, the underlying principles were absolutely there.
How so?
Well, the strong emphasis on UX metrics, the importance placed on actively seeking and using user and customer feedback, the overall goal of achieving satisfaction. It all points towards the philosophy behind XLA.
Okay.
XLA essentially take that focus on the user's whole experience and the business outcomes they achieve. Maybe even a step further than some traditional SLAs, which might be more focused on just the operational metrics.
SLM kind of lays the groundwork.
Exactly. SLM, by incorporating things like UX and satisfaction measurement, provides a really solid foundation for organizations that want to move towards that more experience-centric approach, perhaps using formal XLA.
Got it. So SLM provides the tools and mindset, and XLA are maybe a natural evolution or a deeper focus for some.
I think that's a fair way to put it.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that's come up a few times is collaboration. SLM isn't a solo sport, is it?
Absolutely not. You can't create a shared understanding sitting alone in a room. Who are the key people and teams that really need to be part of these SLM conversations?
Oh, it's quite a crowd. On the service consumer side, you've obviously got the actual customers, the end users who interact with the service every day, and the sponsors, the ones paying the bills. Then on the service provider side, you definitely need input from the service delivery teams, the folks who actually run and maintain the service you need, the architects and designers who built it, and business analysts who really understand the underlying business processes and needs.
So getting all those different perspectives is pretty vital.
It's crucial for creating service levels that are both realistic and valuable, things that truly reflect what's important.
And it's not just about getting that initial agreement right. Is it that collaborative spirit needs to carry on?
Absolutely. Overseeing the service levels requires ongoing communication and data sharing between both consumer and provider stakeholders.
Like what?
Well, getting regular user feedback. As we said, the provider must be transparent about system performance, about any issues that crop up. Effective service reviews should definitely be a joint effort with both sides actively participating.
And if things need fixing?
Then keeping the customer in the loop about improvement plans, about progress being made. That's essential for building and maintaining trust.
So it's really a continuous dialogue, not just signing a contract and walking away.
Right. So how do we actually know if we're hitting those agreed levels? Measurement, right? We need data.
Precisely. Every single service level metric that's agreed upon needs a clear, defined way to be measured and reported on. You can't just guess.
No guessing.
Nope. The guide emphasizes having the right systems and processes in place to collect the data, store it, analyze it, and then present it clearly. Data on performance, but also on user and customer satisfaction levels.
How do you present it?
Usually through regular reports, maybe dashboards that give an easy-to-understand view for all the relevant stakeholders. Visibility is key.
So it's not just gathering numbers, but turning them into actual information people can use to see how things are really going.
Exactly. Information, not just raw data.
And what happens when that information, that data tells us we're falling short, not hitting the targets?
That's where the improve activity really kicks in. Service reviews are a key place to identify those performance gaps.
And then you need to initiate service improvements. These might be focused on fixing the root causes of why you're not meeting the targets, or they could be more proactive, maybe enhancing the service to boost satisfaction even further, potentially exceeding expectations.
So service reviews aren't just looking back, they're really launch pads for future improvements?
They absolutely should be. And these improvement efforts, they shouldn't just be random one-off things. They need to be plugged into the organization's overall approach to getting better.
It's a big part of continual improvement efforts.
Exactly. SLM isn't an island. It's deeply connected to and should feed into the organization's broader continual improvement model. The guide even gives examples of metrics you can use to track how well your SLM practice itself is doing.
Oh, really? Like what?
Things like how satisfied customers are with the actual content of the SLAs or the effectiveness of your service improvement activities. Measuring the practice itself.
Interesting. Okay, this has been really insightful. We've covered a lot. The purpose, the activities, key concepts like quality and levels, the importance of collaboration and measurement. Now, ITIL is built on those guiding principles. How do they apply here to SLM?
Oh, the guiding principles are absolutely foundational for doing SLM. Well, take focus on value, for example.
Okay?
That reminds us that when we define service levels, our main focus should always be on the business outcomes and the user experience, not just getting lost in technical details.
Oh, right. What actually matters to the customer.
Exactly. Then there's start where you are. That suggests we should base our initial agreements on, our current understanding, the existing relationship. Past performance if we have it. Don't try to boil the ocean on day one.
Makes sense. You wouldn't jump into a super complex SLA with a brand new provider if you barely know each other.
Probably not. Then progress iteratively with feedback. That's huge for SLM. It recognizes that understanding and expectations will change over time, so we need to be flexible, review regularly, and adjust agreements as we learn more together.
And collaborate and promote visibility?
That one's obvious, right? It just underscores everything we've said about involving stakeholders and being transparent about performance.
Yeah. Feels central to SLM.
Right.
What about think and work holistically?
That reminds us to consider the whole picture. Both utility, does it do the job? And warranty, does it perform well? Looking at the service offering, the outcomes, all of it together.
Okay. And keep it simple and practical?
Crucial. Focus on what truly matters and what you can actually measure and manage. Realistically, don't create SLAs full of metrics that are impossible to track, or don't add real value. Keep it focused.
Good advice. And the last one, optimize and automate.
Yeah, that encourages us to regularly look at our SLM processes themselves. Are there ways to streamline things? Can we automate reporting or monitoring to free up people for more value-added work? Always looking to improve the practice itself.
So these principles really act like a compass, guiding how we approach SLM effectively.
They really do. Applying them helps ensure SLM isn't just a bureaucratic exercise, but something that genuinely delivers value.
So pulling this all together, it really feels like service level management is so much more than just writing an SLA document. It's a fundamental way of working.
It is.
It's about building and maintaining that shared understanding of value and quality between providers and consumers. It needs ongoing communication, careful monitoring, regular reviews, and a real commitment to improvement, all guided by those core principles.
That's a perfect summary. For you, our listener, getting a good handle on SLM really empowers you. It makes you a much more effective, more informed consumer of services.
How so?
Well, you'll be better able to clearly articulate what you actually need. You'll have more realistic expectations, and you can work more collaboratively with your service providers to make sure your requirements are truly met. It helps level the playing field.
Makes sense. So here's something for you to think about as we wrap up. Consider the service relationships you have right now, maybe with your internal IT or an external supplier. Are you and your providers genuinely speaking the same language when it comes to expectations?
Good question.
Is there maybe one aspect of service quality that's currently just assumed, just implied but not actually written down or agreed upon? And what would it take to actually have that conversation?
Something to ponder.
Definitely. That's your food for thought, following this deep dive into service level management. Thanks for joining us on the second season of ITIL for Unplugged ITSM Elevate.
Until next time.